All right, let's talk about summer walleye locations. This video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to pull up a map and we're going to look through a few different lakes that I've never fished before. I want to apologize ahead of time if this is one of your guys' secret lakes, but I've never fished these lakes. I don't even know if the walleye fishing is good, but if I was going to these lakes and I was going to be adventuring, exploring on these lakes, I'm just going to run through some of the spots where I would be looking first and kind of how I would approach these different lakes. So without further ado, let's jump right into the first lake. All right, so the first lake that I picked, as you can see right here, definitely a bigger lake, definitely a ton of really deep water. This lake definitely has ciscos. I would say there's a possibility there might be smelt in there, I'm not sure. Obviously it could hold lake trout based on just how it's laid out. But for me, when I'm looking at a lake like this, I'm kind of looking at the general depth ranges in different areas of this lake. So as you can see, this west side here has a little bit more shallow water. This whole section right here is all a little bit more shallow. And then this side of the lake has a ton of deep water. So I guess for me, if I'm going to start on a lake like this, I'm going to start in the section where there's kind of the mix of, you know, it's not like 60 feet is shallow, you know, so this whole side definitely has good deep water, but there's a little bit more littoral area on this side of the lake, and this side of the lake right here, I would imagine could still be really good for walleyes, but this is what looks juicy to me right here. So if I'm kind of starting out on the west side of the lake here, one thing that really jumps out to me is there's some really cool structures kind of on this side. So you can see there's kind of like a hump structure right here. This whole finger system looks somewhat interesting. I don't know how dirty or clear this lake is, so I don't know if there's much for weeds, but there's definitely a lot of structure to look at. This thing right here is super interesting, really jumps out to me. Let's see what that tops out at. If my cell phone here would ever load, that would be helpful. 3, 2, okay, I got to turn off the Wi-Fi here. All right, so it looks like it tops out around 10 feet, which is a little shallower than I'd like to fish usually, but there is a little bit more deeper water here. If you sneak out off the edge of this, there's a deep water hump that I might just look at really, really quickly with 2D sonar and side imaging. There's some more deep structure right here that's sort of adjacent. When I'm fishing like main lake humps like this, for me, like I like when they top out in that 20 foot, 18 foot, 30 foot, somewhere in that general range, the 20 to 30 foot range. So some of this looks interesting to me as well. Access to this deeper water is great. You know, there's probably bugs out here. There's probably cisco, smelt, you know, kind of schools and pods of shiner minnows that fish are going to be feeding on. To me, this hump right here maybe looks a little bit deeper. I don't think I would fish that. But kind of running along the side here, you know, you can look in areas like this. Sometimes you'll find fish kind of suspended sort of in these bowl-shaped areas. And same with this, it's kind of a transition area. But to me, what kind of looks the best in this whole kind of neck of the woods is right here. There's sort of this sharp break and it kind of tapers here. You know, there's a sharper break and a tapering break. I would look along this area right here. So let's see if we zoom out a little bit, what else do we got? I would say this spot right here looks really good too. Let's see if we can see the depths there. There we go. Tops out a little bit high, you know, but definitely fishable. There may be fish kind of all along this edge right here. And then I guess, you know, there's definitely a number of more interesting spots over here. A lot of this structure could hold fish. This hump right here, this edge right here, right off this island right here is all interesting to me. This hump right here as well may have some fish on it. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff throughout here. And actually the problem with this lake is that there's too much good looking structure for me to like really tell you like the 5 spots on this lake or whatever. But let's kind of transition over to the deeper side of the lake. And with ultra deep lakes like this, a lot of what's happening in these systems, as you can tell, there's not like a ton of flats, you know, it's like a lot of sharp breaks, you know. There's island complexes throughout here, and there are some like smaller flats in some of these areas. But all in all, I think in a lot of cases, spots like this are going to be sort of controlled by current. They're going to be controlled by the bait fish. So in a lot of cases, I'm going to look at a few different areas and see what the bait fish concentration is. You may find, you know, that there's more bait in certain pinch point areas. You may find that most of the bait is stacked up on one side of the lake, you know, if that's where the wind has been blowing. So this area right here jumps out to me because, as you can see, there's a big arm. And actually, you could look around up in here too, but as far as the main lake goes, this spot looks cool to me. So what do we got here? We have some deeper water running down here. There's definitely a pinch point right here. I would definitely be looking kind of in this, let's see, there we go, in this general area, kind of off the tip of here. This is some deeper structure, but you're probably going to have to fish a little bit deeper on this side of the lake. This spot right here might be interesting, but this is an area where there may be a lot of bait fish funneled through. I would also look on the other side here, you know, something along this side could be interesting. You may find some fish up here, but let's see. Can we find one more spot that catches my eye on this deeper side of the lake possibly? Let's go over here on the far east side. What would I instantly look around and fish? Okay, so here's another one that I kind of find cool. So obviously there's more lake over here. This could be spawning grounds, possibly back on this bay right here. So there's probably going to be some fish that are actually somewhat close to that area. So these humps right here jump out to me right away for sure. So if you look out, I wonder how far we can zoom into this and have my map load. There we go. If you could definitely look at fishing like the edges of these right along the side of this deep water. So obviously there's going to be, you know, ciscos and bug hatches out here in the basin. So these fish probably aren't going to be too far from that edge area. When you do get to summer, the thing about summer is, you know, basically fish are going to be pushing out a lot deeper and chasing different types of forage. So this whole area, I would definitely take a good look at this spot. I would use, you know, side imaging, of course, and also forward-facing sonar to just scan around and see if there's any suspended fish around this area. I could definitely see an argument for like pulling crankbaits like lead core along this edge. So yeah, that's a couple spots over here. This edge kind of looks good too. I could see fish suspending around here. I could see fish piled up on this hump as well. Even this spot right here, obviously it looks like there are some rocks right on the edge of here. And I'm not necessarily going to be fishing shallow rocks for walleyes. This is very shallow, but you may find some fish kind of out along here as well. So basically what I'm looking for in a lake like this is deeper humps, pinch point areas, and also in addition to that, you know, there might be some cool saddle systems and stuff like that. I'm assuming there's not going to be a lot of weeds, but where you are going to find weeds, I would definitely be looking in the weeds as well. There may be some weeds kind of in this general area. So if you can find patches of weeds or even a weed line, weeds are always going to hold fish. So I don't know a lot about this lake, but this might be a dirtier water lake where there's not as much weeds either, or it might be ultra clear and there's going to be weeds in different areas. So look for weeds, look for those humps, and yeah, look for areas that are holding a lot of bait fish. But now we're going to jump into the second lake. All right, so the second one I pulled up is significantly different, a lot shallower. The breaks are a lot not quite as steep. There's more littoral area on this lake, so more of this kind of shallow flats, stuff like that. Actually, this lake, if it does have walleyes, is probably like a lot of the lakes in the state of Minnesota where I live, where, you know, they don't necessarily have a natural population of walleyes. Unless there's a river system coming in somewhere, it's likely that a lake like a lake like this would end up being a stocked walleye lake. So this lake is a lot shallower. So with that being said, there's still going to be muddy basin areas. There's still going to be bug hatches, but we're probably not looking at a lake with like suspended Cisco in it, probably. So this whole bay, depending on what it looks like, there may be some spawning ground in this area, maybe, you know, some good spring activity over here. This is a small enough lake though where I could see the fish kind of traveling throughout it. So let's look at kind of some of the best summertime spots on here. So obviously right away, because it's summer, I'm looking at some of this main lake structure. To me, a lot of this stuff is probably going to have weeds on it. So what you can do is you can kind of work these edges of the weeds. Some of this stuff, like if there's weeds kind of in this general area, I could definitely see working along this weed edge, looking for schools of walleye. In addition, I love the way this kind of finger looks that's sticking out. It's possible that this finger is just totally completely covered with weeds, but if it's not, and it's right outside of this weed edge, I could definitely see walleyes piling up on the tip of it, inside corner right there, along this edge, kind of where it transitions from this sharper break into this more sloping break. So this is kind of a cool area as well. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, so when you're talking about some deeper structure on this particular lake, this area right here definitely jumps out to me. So unless the weeds run really deep in this lake, this is going to be just traditional non-weedy walleye structure. So I would look all along this edge right here. This looks really juicy to me. If there's a weed line up here, there may be patchy weeds in this area. If there's patchy weeds, you know, I'm going to be scouting all through that area, just looking for marks that are scattered in the weeds. You're going to find some bass, but if this lake has some population of walleye, you know, there may be some walleye scattered in there as well. Another one, this looks really good. There's probably a weed line up in here, and then this kind of extends from this shallower area into like a really cool main lake structure. So this is an area where I could see running around with electronics and scanning. I could also see like trolling this along the edge and just kind of looking around as you're doing it. Obviously some of this main lake structure is, you know, probably pretty good. But yeah, let's see what else. If there's anything that looks really, really good that catches my eye. I could see poking around in this area right here. And actually this whole kind of general area I would just look at, because summertime you're going to find some bigger fish suspended. And in that case, I really like some of these humps and kind of in between the structure where they have access to this, they have access to this, they have access to some of this deeper water. So those are some areas I would definitely take a peek at. This right here is a cool looking tip on this structure right here. I would also maybe just take a quick peek at this inside corner. But yeah, I think that is pretty much the gist of it. Did we talk about this hump? I can't remember if we talked about this hump. The cool thing about humps is generally they're a little bit smaller and you can look at them really, really quick. It doesn't take long to see if there's any fish on there. So if there's main lake humps that are just kind of generally around, you know, throughout the lake, I just look at them. I instantly look at them because I know it's only going to take me like 3 minutes to use like side imaging. If you want to drop forward facing sonar and see if there's any suspended fish around the area, it's really easy to do. But that is pretty much the rundown on this lake. This lake was so much more simple. It took me a while to kind of break through that, break down that first lake. So hopefully I didn't lose you at that first lake and you made it to this one. But now we're going to jump into the third lake. I'm going to try and find something that looks a little bit different than this. All right, next up we have another lake that I've never fished before. And this one is even simpler and more bowl-shaped and less structured than the last one that we fished. So far we've gone from lakes that are extremely structure heavy to kind of moderate. And now this is almost a bowl, and I know some of the lakes that you guys fish are going to be sort of similar to this. So when I look at this fish, or when I look at this lake right away, you can see it's very shallow. There are some rivers. There's like a river right here that's either going in or going out. There's a connecting lake here. Looks like the ramp is right here where these two little lakes connect, and then there's also a river system. So there's a river feeding in or out right here, and it's feeding in or out right here. So on lakes like this, where there's maybe less obvious structure, I'm definitely going to keep in mind where there may be some current flowing through and some of these river spots. So as you can see, this is a very, very dramatically sharp break, which isn't always what I'm looking for, but because we have the river right there, I'll probably look along this edge. This would be a good spot to look with 2D sonar, moving quickly just to see if you see any big marks, if you see any bait fish that's stacked up against this wall. This could be a spot where there's suspended walleyes hanging out along that edge as well. But as I look around, this looks like it's a very, very obvious structure where there could be things on it. I like this sharper break here, but some of this, which it looks a little bit more complex, I could definitely see some of this holding walleyes, even sneaking down in the southeast side as well. But this tip right here is an area that I would say like has the highest probability of having something on it. If there are some weeds here, I could definitely see some bass being up in here, but also maybe some weeds along this edge. But obviously I'm also going to look as it pertains to this area right here, because there probably is current running through here. Gall, you might be able to catch fish just right out in front of here. It would be interesting to look at this spot in real life to see how it lays out. Also, this might be so small, you might be so close to shore that it doesn't look as good once you kind of see the scale of the lake. But regardless, this area could have some stuff on it. I kind of like this little tip right here, and also this little bump out. As you can see, there's kind of, you know, a little 20-foot, 18-foot little bump out there. But what looks even more attractive to me is some of this main lake structure. So, man, I do feel like with how close this is to the river, or kind of, you know, the current pinch point system, I could see these areas kind of loading up with fish. So obviously this spot looks really good right here, just because there's not very much structure. Pretty much anything, you know, that has some sort of complex structure is going to be interesting. So yeah, I mean, nothing over here looks too good, but maybe the sweet spot in the lake is over there. You know, I don't know, tough to say. I probably wouldn't fish this. Not to say there couldn't be walleyes in there, that there wouldn't be, but I would spend more of my attention kind of on this main lake area if I was looking at this system without knowing, you know, the size of the rivers or anything like that. So there you have it. There's another lake and how I would break it down. All right, here's something a little bit different. Obviously, we got some river vibes to this one, and we have some really deep water in it as well. So it's kind of a cool looking lake. I've never fished it, like I've mentioned before, so don't run to these lakes and assume this is going to be great if you fish these spots. But if I was fishing this lake, and if I had insight saying that this was a viable lake, these are some of the spots I'd look at. So obviously there's deep water kind of all along this whole thing. So the first things first, I would always be looking for deeper water, but there's definitely kind of a surplus of deep water on this particular body of water. So as I look a little bit closer, let's take a look at some of this structure. So as we look along here, some of this could be interesting. You know, anywhere along these edges, you know, there could be fish stacked up, but I'm going to look for some of the more obvious structures. So something like this where it sticks out a little bit, you know, there's a break coming along the edge of here. There could be fish over on the back side as well. Obviously, this is kind of a prevalent structure right in the middle of this system. I would look out along the edges of here. I wouldn't spend a lot of time. I'd probably use side imaging to cover water pretty quickly. Man, this spot is a very, very obvious good looking spot right here. Let's see if we can zoom in here. So obviously looking along the tip here, this whole thing is a really good pinch point. I can see fish being anywhere in this area as well. They may be around on the back side. So this whole section right here looks viable. Obviously, you know, extremely shallow water right here, but you kind of have an interesting flat area right here, and then access to deep water. So this is a cool spot. I would look around here for certain. Let's see here. And then as we move along, once again, you know, there could be fish on any, you know, number of spots along here. But let's see what else we got. So this is kind of an interesting one. This is probably a little deeper than I'd like to fish, but I do like the general like shape of that structure. This area right here is kind of cool, in that obviously you have a nice flat, good littoral area, but yeah, some of this structure coming off of here is interesting, possibly viable. If there are weeds on here, along this weed line would probably be excellent. You could catch them on the back side of this as well. But kind of areas like this too, where it comes up a little higher right here, you have shore right here, you have a little bit of a saddle. It's a deeper saddle, but I kind of like this whole area in general. So let's see, what else could we fish here? No wake area in here. I don't know what's going on in here, but man, if you snuck into this little lake right here, I could definitely see, I definitely look kind of like right in front of where this current is going to be running through here. I could definitely see walleyes being piled up there, or even on the backside right here. So yeah, this is a quick one. There's not as much here. It's one of those lakes, it's one of those fisheries you'd probably have to go there and look around to have a little bit better feel. But that's something that's this is something that's totally different than what we've looked at so far. All right, we got another lake right here. As you look at this lake, just the overview of it, you can see that there is some really deep water here. And what's cool is it kind of runs along here in a line. So it's kind of, you know, this big interesting corridor of deeper water that even kind of extends out to here, you know. But there is also quite a bit of good deep water on the north end of the lake there. But if we zoom in here, obviously like anywhere related to this deeper water is interesting, because there probably will be some suspended bait fish in this area. So if there are ciscos, I could see them being piled up in here. So this is a good area in general. You know, spots like this hump looks just juicy. You know, when you're talking about summertime walleyes, there's probably bait fish that's going to be around it. You're going to have mud around it, so you're going to have bugs. There could be walleyes right up on the top of this, but you may just see them suspended kind of all around this structure. So I love the way this thing looks. And even as you like sneak your way from there over to here, you know, this doesn't necessarily have access to the ultra deep water, but I could see some fish being on this thing as well. So when you look over here, you know, if there is weeds on this bar, there could be walleyes. Well, look at this inside corner here. This is pretty cool. There may be walleyes stacked up on here. Anywhere along this edge, if there are weeds there, I definitely could see there being some weed line walleyes in those areas. Let's see here. We're kind of getting away from the deeper water right now. This structure looks good. A nice hump area. You could definitely cover that area pretty quickly with side imaging and just see if there's anything there. But going back to some of this deeper water stuff, like a pinch point like this, where it goes from this nice shallow or flat area, and then there's this really, really shallow deal right here. But this area, I could see walleye suspending kind of in and around this area. But even like fishing kind of I guess anywhere along this structure right here, this whole thing looks really good. So I would look around on here. This spot, I would consider this to be like a saddle right here that goes from this high point to this high point. So this whole thing, this looks like one of the best spots in the whole lake to me. And you may also find, so you may find walleyes on top of this, but I could definitely see some suspending either there, but especially right on this inside area. I could definitely see them floating around in between those two pieces of structure right there. Same here, look at this saddle. This is a really cool one too. Looks like it tops out, let's see, tops out right at about 24. So you have some deeper water over here, deeper water over here. This whole thing looks really cool. Also, suspended walleyes could be hanging out in this area right here. I don't exactly know how big this area is, but looks pretty cool to me. Obviously, this whole thing looks interesting. It'd be worth kind of poking around and seeing, you know, what some of this looks like. Obviously, this is really shallow up on top, or quite, you know, pretty shallow, especially in this area. But, you know, along the edges of this, especially if there's weeds on it, right here is some sort of saddle system. This saddle might have weeds all the way across it, but if it doesn't, and there's weeds like right here, and as we wait for the map to load, if there's weeds right here, and there's weeds right here, and no weeds right here, this could be a really cool spot. Or if the weeds just get more sparse in that area, that could be a cool place that holds walleyes. So yeah, obviously this is a good little shoreline structure. Almost certainly some sort of cover on here. This break could be really good. Let's see, where does that go? Yeah, this area here is kind of an interesting pinch point. It doesn't have access to that, you know, the rest of the lake as well, you know, the main lake area. But I could definitely maybe see some walleyes hanging out in this general area. So obviously you're going to look at this, you know, anytime you're going to be fishing any of these lakes, for me, I like to look at structure that is the most complex. And when I say that, I mean, you know, there might be, well, I guess I'll just point to this. I mean, this is a complex area, right? There's kind of tops out here, but it also tops out here. And I guess maybe an elementary way to explain a complex piece of structure is squiggly lines. You know, not as many straight lines, just a little bit more weird stuff going on. I could definitely see somewhere within this complex there being, you know, some walleyes. Just because there is so much cover, so much structure here, and there's almost certainly some sort of cover on the very tops of here, whether it's weeds or rocks. This spot is called No Fish Hump, which tells me that it is definitely loaded with fish. So, yeah, I guess we'll leave it at that. There's a whole different part of this lake, although I don't know, can you even get in there? It looks like there's a road going across. Oh, there is a channel. Yeah, oh, these are cool too. Look at this. So we got some cool deeper humps sort of in the middle of this second lake. This looks really good. Obviously there could be fish anywhere related to this big long finger that's sticking out. Yeah, there's too much stuff to even really point out. There's good structure all over this lake. I don't know if there's walleyes on it. Wouldn't surprise me if there were some walleyes, especially possibly stocked in there. So anyway, once again, not trying to out anybody's favorite lake. I'm just picking random lakes on the map. I haven't fished them. Don't know if they have walleyes. Don't know if they're good. But if I had to guess, these would be some good spots on these lakes if they did have a good walleye population. So anywho, thank you for watching all the way to the end of this video. Because this video was all about location, I think what we're going to do now is I'm going to put a video right here that you should check out that breaks down basically a number of different presentations, you know, baits, tactics that you can use during the summer months. You can pair this location information with this tactical information.